Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm delighted today actually to be in the offices of 11FS, and I'm here with the CEO, David Brear. David, thanks for allowing me to come in and see you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, look, if nobody knows who 11FS is, why don't you just share with our listeners a little bit about you and the company, if that's all right?
Yeah, sure. So 11FS, it's a little company we started just over 3.5 years ago now. It's very complicated to try and explain what we do, but it's easier to kind of try and explain to you like why, I guess.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, after working at big consultancies and big banks in various different places, really we were just pretty underwhelmed as a founding team of the change that we were really seeing in the market. We talk about digital banking really being 1% finished, and that's because really what we're seeing are people spending billions of pounds trying to level up their aspiration, but without actually delivering what it is that they want to deliver. Which is kind of why we're in this weird digitized banking phase. A lot of people sort of say they've got a digital bank, but they really don't. We don't know what that is. We haven't really seen that yet. But fundamentally, we're in this period of such change within the industry, that move from analog to digitized and really into what truly digital actually means. And because of that, it's really that view that with 1% finished being the case, then the next 99% of this journey is going to be really, really fascinating. So whether it's building new products for people, whether it's building new products for us, whether it's building brand new core banking systems, then we're kind of addressing all of those industry problems to see what we can do at fixing them.
And out of interest, talking about the changes that are going on within the industry, who do you see in the marketplace that's perhaps doing a great job of it, and why are they being so successful?
I think that's really interesting because it's one of those ones where big banks were just used to competing with big banks for a long period of time. So if you were HSBC, you'd look at your tower and look at Barclays, who were like 2 away from you to figure out what you needed to do from a product perspective or from an experiential perspective in terms of what you needed to deliver. And the industry has fundamentally changed over the last 5 to 6 years with really, I think, coming out of the UK, the competition mandate that's been driven by the regulators. So all of the work that the FCA and the PRA and the Bank of England have been doing to create such a dynamic environment here that competition is good for everybody. And because of that, actually what we've seen is whole new players come to the market, people like the Monzos, people like Starling, Revolut, coming into this space. And actually, I mean, it sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but like doing stuff customers want and sort of delivering it at pace. And I kind of love the fact that the competition for the big banks, it's not just what they're doing that's important, it's the way in which they're doing it. So for a FinTech who can go from a fantastic idea to it being executed to it being used in for 2 million people being maybe 4 weeks, a big bank would have to spend possibly the best part of a year to make that happen. And this is probably the point that we're at in the cycle right now is the people who look like competition to the banks in 6 months' time will be leading the banks. And if you look at the space that we're in now with wholesale resets of net promoter score leaders, it used to be First Direct was smashing that every year in every study. Now it's a race between Monzo and Starling, and that gap between the really offensive FinTech players and the banks who have been used to playing defense for such a long period of time is just going to get bigger and bigger.
It's a great point you make about the difference between those, and as an example around the community about scaling and making changes. So I think about my bank being, NatWest, and I'm not part of a community like I can go on with Monzo or Starling, where they might implement that change based on a vote from their customers.
Yeah, I mean, even down to like how pricing's done. Like Monzo and before them, people like Fedor actually they engage the community so heavily that you are part of the building of that product. This isn't a product that somebody delivers to you that you merely consume. Then actually, as a user, as a customer, you have an ability to share your views and share your displeasure. I think just the whole transparency in that system in terms of how the product is built and how the product's taken to market is just fundamentally different.
We're in your offices over in Devonshire Square, and I know it's part of the WeWork, which is a fantastic environment here. You've got about 120 people and growing quickly. What's the biggest challenge for you in scaling the business and attracting the right people for the culture that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges we've had over the last 3 years have been, different, 3 different periods of it. I should say we're a wholly owned subsidiary, so wholly owned company, so we've not been VC backed. We're not, spending money to get rid of it in that sense. So the challenge that we had initially was put some money in the bank, slightly followed by build a brand. Now that we've kind of 3.5 years in, the challenge really is scaling the thing that we've done amazingly well, and making sure actually we protect the values that have made it successful in the first place. I think big organizations who have any element of success will, probably rightly so in some instances, kind of ossify around that success. And the thing that I'm spending most of my time on really thinking about now is, where are we going, and are we going fast enough? And then in terms of the environment that we create for the people who work with us, then it's making sure actually that we allow people to do the best work that they've ever done. We really describe our vision really as just unleashing talent, because if we can hire the best people and create the best environment to actually get the most out of those people while they're with us, then actually that we achieve all of our objectives. The people who work here do the best work and put the best things on their CV. And from our perspective, actually we're moving quicker and doing things faster than anybody's ever done before.
So David, what does a typical day in the business look like for you today?
Typical businesses days are pretty atypical, if I'm honest with you. That's the problem. It's the nice thing as well, because it stops me getting bored. It's anything from, this weekend kind of doing various different bits and bobs. Today doing a whole heap of either client meetings to work through strategy with those guys, to some media things with you and with some other people as well, to dealing with like real problems that we've got that we need to address and need to move forward. So, the business is very, very varied. The media side of things that we do, I see as a nice dessert every so often to sort of kind of keep those things kind of moving. But we've got all of the stresses and strains of a 3.5-year-old company. I think the difference is that we're in a great position because our executive team are in a spot where all of us coming together, there's almost nothing that we can't fix. We've got people who founded Monzo, we've got people who, our CTO was prior to this CTO of Nutmeg, but before that Betfair, people like Lida Gliptis from prior to this QMB, prior to that Sapient. We've got real heavyweight people on our executive and on our management team who I firmly believe there's pretty much nothing we can't solve.
So, David, who inspires you? Who has inspired you as a leader, perhaps, and how have they even been a mentor to you throughout your own journey?
If I'm honest, I always sort of say it's like I've learned more from bad managers and bad environments than I have good managers and great environments. I think when you go to a business when you're younger and you're learning and everything is great, it really warps your perspective on actually what companies are like. My experience when I was at Aviva, it was a fantastic team. There was incredibly talented people with a really good operating model, and we got amazing things done so quickly. I can't say that about everywhere I worked. And actually, if I'm honest with you, the things that I've learned from band managers have stuck with me a lot more than some of the good ones, if I'm honest. Definitely in terms of management, bizarrely, my mum and dad taught me a bunch of things. If not only my mum teaching me how to do handshakes properly when I was 8, or we just actually appointed a chairman at 11FS. So a guy called Sean Meadows, who's just come in, who's ex-CEO of Aviva. And what struck me about Sean, actually, he was at Aviva when I was at Aviva, was, the separation between the two of us was about 10,000 levels at that stage in my career and his. But what struck me was you don't have to show bad behaviors to be senior in an organization. Sean, when I presented to his board and the engagement that I saw from them is the leader really sets the tone and the behaviors and the mannerisms and really what is expected from everybody else. Learning that from him then and now getting him to work with us at 11FS it's a good way to go.
Brilliant. And what we talked about it slightly before the podcast started about employee engagement and what companies are doing. How do you keep your employees engaged at 11FS?
Again, very much learning from what I've seen not be done great at other organizations is every year you'll get a leader stand up and talk about all the things that are important, that nobody can ever remember, that are meaningless in the role that you're specifically doing. Yeah. And what we try and do is, my background is more sports than it is business, really. So I try and deploy more sports management and mentality into our organization than I do business practices. So for me, motivation and direction and strategy and tactics, if you're playing sports, is not something you do annually. Pep Guardiola does not set up the tactics once a year and then walk away from it. It's every game, every training session, every win, every loss is an opportunity for course correction and refinement. So whether it's a meeting or whether it's a presentation we do to somebody, whether it's a podcast we're doing, whether it's how we all collectively talk about the business in terms of the narrative, these are all opportunities for me to sort of reinforce why these things work. So, the other thing as well is actually, doing things that people believe in. A lot of organizations where you work where, you might believe in the company, but the company does the wrong types of work for the wrong types of reasons. And very much being in a situation where you're choosing the work and you're able to choose the work that actually has the most impactful from a societal perspective. For us, it's working in financial services. Then payday lenders, not high on our agenda of people to work with. People taking financial services to places that it's never been. That's very much high on our agenda. And if you kind of look at how the industry is sort of rethinking with FinTech, then most of the things that are coming to market and being truly successful now are the ones who are ultimately plugging a gap for the consumer that hasn't been plugged before. And if people can't get excited about that, then I don't know what they can.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
I've had lots of people sort of come with lots of different bits of advice and various different guises. Some of which is great to know to not to do. Somebody once said to me, "Think rich, act poor," and that's always really sort of stuck with me. If actually, whether you're in a big corporate, whether you're in a small startup, then aspiring to greatness in terms of what you want to achieve, and then actually putting in place the tactics that actually get you there without the bravado of the big budgets, seems to be working out for us pretty well.
Brilliant. Now, how do you help a new employee, understand the culture of the business in those first few weeks or first few months?
Do you know, this has been a really interesting thing, and actually we're in the midst of sort of evolving how we do this, because when we were 5 people sat around a table, then like culture and values were something instinctive. They weren't something that actually you needed to think about and document. I'd really question any startup that under 20 people have to write down what their culture is and what their values is, because if it's not instinctive with those first 20 people, then you've got the wrong 20 people. But when you get over 100 people and you're scaling and you're bringing more and more people into the organization, then really defining not only what you stand for when it comes to your values, but fundamentally, what is the vision of the company? Where are you going? What is the mission? How are you actually going to make that happen? And then looking for opportunities to really sort of reinforce that. So for us, the values that we've set out, how do we reinforce them in the way in which managers are having conversation with people? How do we use a tool called 15.5, which actually allows us to sort of tap into a kind of a pulse check of the business on a weekly basis, and actually the ways in which people say thank you to other people for good work that they've done through high fives, through things like 15.5, then starting to align those to the values of the organization. Anytime any of the executive are standing up in front of anybody, we're doing it with that framework in mind. And even down to, if I'm honest with you, like the values that we have, things like passion, things like positivity, turn into very quickly stickers and t-shirts and all these types of things, which actually, when people buy into the values, when they buy into the company, are things that they're proud to wear. And that's, for us, it's almost using, to the point of virality earlier on for customers, you have to work as hard to make sure that your employees believe in the thing that you're doing as you do your end consumers, because they're going to be the people who are ultimately going to be dealing with those customers, your end customers, on a day-to-day basis. And I've worked in a few organizations where I didn't quite believe in the product, and if you don't believe in the product, you're never going to be able to get other people to believe.
Now, we touched on it a little bit earlier, and I'd just like to talk about how you see the industry changing in the next 5 years. But I'm more keen, not just from a customer or the end customer point of view, but how you see the change in the, what I'd say, the traditional consulting route, where companies support those organizations. How do you see those two bits changing in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I see the industry more broadly becoming more competitive.
Right.
You know, if you kind of think from an end consumer's perspective, whether it's retail, whether it's the commercial banking sense, we've just seen the RBS remedies pour. I think it's £860 million of funding into the industry in the UK. We're seeing wealth management players come into the space. People like Free Trade in the investment side of things kind of coming in and getting stronger. We've got Robinhood coming in from the US. So, I mean, the FinTech space is getting more competitive than ever. I think the big banks are kind of waking up to these problems. So, we've done work with people like NatWest in the UK to build out new banks internally. And the reason for that is not just so they've got another brand in the game, but fundamentally to change the culture in those organizations and change the aspirations that they've got from a technological perspective. Because there is no reason why, I mean, in any fight, I will always back the people who've got the most amount of customers and the most amount of money to invest. It's just whether they've got the ability to actually, get it together quick enough that actually they don't lose so many customers that they lose their unassailable lead that they currently have. Because while people like Monzo, people like Starling are super, super impressive, I'm more impressed on how they do it than what they've done so far. If they can get up to a scale where they're truly challenging HSBC or Barclays or NatWest, then actually the game changes quite dramatically. I think from people that are working with them to solve it, I think this is the biggest problem, that if you're an Accenture, if you're a McKinsey, if you're a Bain or a BCG, like the problem is that people have tried that route many times before, but it's that definition of insanity. You just do the same thing over and over and again and hope you're going to get a different outcome. Whereas actually the fundamental traits of what digital actually is kind of breaks those models quite dramatically, because digital is it's a small team sport. This isn't about having 1,000 people to take the hill. This is about having the small, highly trained, highly motivated, highly talented team of people who will go and make that happen. It's moving from that big armies to special forces. And the difficult thing, I think, for some of those traditional players in that space is that it requires such an amazing amount of earnesty and authenticity to come through to actually say to people that the ways that you've got successful in the first place are not going to get you success in the future. And then the second thing is it fundamentally breaks their business models, because if you're incentivized through time and materials and suddenly you can't sell time and you can't sell many materials because it's a small team sport, then it's a business model that actually you'll try and perpetuate for as long as you can. Big consultancies are in the same spot that big banks are. They're defending revenue models that don't exist anymore, but are just too hard to get out off that. It's the hardest drug to always get off is your business model.
It's interesting, and the old analogy about you won't get fired for going with IBM. How does that CEO of that organization make that decision to not stay with that old guard model and to embrace a new way of working? What would you say about that?
I mean, IBM specifically, I think I actually used that nobody gets fired for IBM thing presenting at an IBM conference recently, actually. That model is changing so dramatically because people are not buying into companies because they believe that their grad scheme will probably have picked out the 5% of people. They're looking for the people who have actually delivered this stuff before. Yeah. So, really a big part of what we do is de-risking innovative processes by putting in place the guy who did Monzo or the guy who did Nutmeg or whoever to actually show them that big organizations can address things in the way that startups do, which means really, if I'm honest with you, the only sustainable advantage that big organizations have is agility. It kind of comes back to evolution, right? Evolution is not for every species, but the ones who get it usually survive. And the big banks really have to get on that, which is if they can continually be truly agile, and by that I don't mean post-it notes and beanbags around their office, but the ability to really understand what the consumer wants and react to it, or even be proactive to get ahead of it when it comes to regulatory changes or technological changes that allow them to unlock potential and create services that they've never done before, then this is where their unique advantage comes from. You can't just create a big moat around your customer base and expect them to stay, because at this age, I sort of joke about the difference between choice and competition. Customers have been used to having choice. It was the choice between a red one or a blue one or a green one. Fundamentally, they were the same things. Now they actually have competition, which means the things that Revolut are doing, the things that Starling are doing, the things that Monzo are doing, are actually creating value for consumers. They're making them spend less money. They're making them save better. They're making them earn more when they're saving. All of these things are services. It's just ironic that we've been conditioned for the last decade to expect bad service from banks, because fundamentally they forgot they were financial services. It's in the name. If it was financial services, we'd be actually getting a service. What we're really getting is just products.
Well, it's interesting talking about that stuff. When you've got a big company like one of the big traditional banks, they might need to implement a new system. Hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds. They might be working one of those big consultancy partners. They've got offshore teams in India or near shore across Europe. They might not be working in an agile way. The teams might be. They've got big challenges, and by the time they've implemented the system, it's out of date anyway.
Yeah.
So,
if your developers are a 12-hour flight away and you're claiming you do agile, you don't know what it means. I really think there's an interesting point here where I think banks have almost just got too big to really be successful in the way that they need to, but they've also got too many customers and too much investment to really write them off. So if you kind of look at the players who have started to get this, that actually, is it quicker for us to start something new and scale it than it is to fix what we've got? Because you were being kind when you said hundreds of millions. These guys are spending multiple billions a year just to keep their lights on. This is the OPEX for every tier one bank is at least 2-point-something billion a year. And actually the problem that they've got is the way that they spend their CapEx is actually just layering on more OPEX cost. So that 2 billion this year will be 2.2 billion next year and 2.4 billion the year after. And if you're a CEO of a big bank right now, that's the thing that's kind of keeping you up at night, is actually you can keep spending hundreds of millions of pounds each year trying to do innovative things in beautiful looking innovation spaces, but unless it's materially changing your operating cost and your operating rhythm and delivering value to consumers, then actually you're spending your cash reserves in a way that actually makes your bank unsustainable. Because if you're a FinTech player who can run a current account for £2-3, as opposed to a big high street bank where it costs £250, then you've got a lot of money and you can sustain that winter for a long time, but it's a slow death, a very, very slow one. And actually, I guess, I think it's a Andreessen Horowitz quote around, can startups get scale before incumbents get innovation? And we're seeing that play out in such a beautiful way right now that, I'm just glad I do this stuff now. 10 years ago, banking must have been really boring about, checks and stuff coming in, but, we're very lucky to be working in this industry today.
Now, you mentioned a bit earlier a great thing that your mum taught you about shaking a hand properly when you were young. Is there this goal, by the way? We have to thank her for that. But is there perhaps a story from your childhood that you could share with us that has influenced your work ethic in later life?
Do you know what? I think there's a real interesting thing. Bizarrely, me and Jason were talking about this. Jason was one of the co-founders of 11FS, and he was actually one of the co-founders of Monzo as well. So spent a lot of time there. We both were sort of talking about this actually after one of the 11FS's town halls last week. And do you know what? I think the thing that made me, because I wasn't great at working hard, if I'm honest with you. I was a sports guy, and actually, so running and throwing and jumping and stuff was my thing. And doing sports science, I was going to be I was playing basketball actively at the time. Unfortunately, having torn 3 ligaments in my left knee and having to get a proper job, the reality of actual work and impact. Because I was naturally very good at sports, I could do that really without the same level of effort, but also it was easy to me, therefore my motivation was easy to do it. If you can do something first try or within a few tries, then your rewards mechanism is very, very different. Taking that from sports into, well, man, now I'm doing maths and computing and business to work those things out. It only sort of occurred to me bizarrely. I remember this really vividly of kind of coming out of my undergrad degree in computing with a 2-1 and being happy for about 5 seconds, and then realizing that about 5,000 other people were standing in and around me who had either better or the same thing. And then for somebody who really sort of prides themselves on individuality, to suddenly feel like a turtle on the beach was a real problem to me. And actually, it sounds stupid, but at that point, realizing that actually, work ethic can overcome average intelligence is a real thing. So being in a situation where you work harder than anybody else that's around you to do something, and that's not long hours and working weekends, that's working smart in terms of what you're setting out to achieve. So for me, that's all I've literally done since then is, went into my master's to work harder than anybody else did, got a 87%, 88% average, and then I've just continued that all the way through my life. I think the other thing both my parents tried to drill out of me was asking why, because it's really annoying as a kid, but it's really, really effective when you're an adult. Continually trying to understand the process and understand why something is the way that it is actually makes you, that sort of inquisitive nature makes you really understand why something is in the way it is. And most people just accept things in the way that they are. But if you really want to change the thing that you do, whether it's banking infrastructure, whether it's global financial services, whether it's how the regulator works, you have to start with why is it done in the way that it is.
I love that. Now, final question for you, David. If you could go back to your early 20s, and you could give yourself one piece of advice on reflection now, what would you say to yourself?
So if I could go back, I'd go back earlier than early 20s. So 3 ligaments went in my knee when I was 19. So if I could go back maybe a year before then, I'd tell myself not to push myself so hard playing basketball. That would be great. I think the other thing as well is that unfortunately I lost my dad when I was 19 as well. So if I could go back to 18, that would be great, because I think when you're working so hard and you're pushing yourself so hard, realizing to really enjoy every moment, because you never know when it will be gone. From the point where my ligaments went, I've never felt comfortable to play sport in the same way as I did before. And I'd love some more moments with my dad as well.
Appreciate that. David, thanks so much for sharing this with us today. If people want to find out more about you, want to get in touch with 11FS, how do they do it?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at David Brear, or if you want to find out more about the company, go over to www.11fs.com.
David, thanks for your time.
No problem.
We really hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please take a moment to give us a review. 4 stars would be good, but 5 stars would be amazing.